Oh, hey folks, welcome back to the shed. Well, now, this week, as you might be able to tell from what's in front, we're working on some beach rings for a series, well, funnily enough, called The Beaches of Pembrokeshire. It's meant to be sort of a representation of the beach as I see them. Got some poppet sands here, Tenby, that's North Beach specifically, and that's my local favourite beach, West Dale. So, we'll get on with it. As you can see, not a whole lot to be done. It's the normal stuff you see so far in all the other videos. So instead of boring you with that, let's talk about what I'm going to be doing here. These rings are meant to initially be sort of an artistic attempt to replicate the beaches that the materials are collected from. But also they're going to be for sale, so there's going to be some very basic ones as well. I'll show you later on. One of the rings in here is the most basic version. But otherwise it's sort of how I view the beach as I'm walking across it. Now, two of these three rings today are that, but they're specifically the sand, the view at your feet, I suppose, as you're walking across the beach. I'll explain more about each one then as we go. Now, bear in mind before we go forward, guys, this is my version of, this is how I see the beaches. This is how I interpret it. You might have a completely different idea from me, but hey, hopefully what I'm trying to do here works and you can see where we go with it, where we're going with it when we get there. And as you can see up to this point now, we're just sort of roughing out the size of the ring. There, you just saw me taking it up the inside up to 400. And this is all a practice, so some of the stuff is done out of order. But here I am, burning in the name of the beach on the inside and my logo. At this point in time, it does look like the best way to do it is just to keep going over and over instead of trying to burn each individual letter solid on the first attempt. And there we go. Of course, now we'll repeat the process for the other two after giving this one a little tidy up. Then we get some oil on them. And then we move on from there. Well, as you could see earlier, I was leaving some high points on the outside of the blanks, so I'm taking my little sanding board here and just smoothing that down and taking them down to the thickness I'm looking for. Then we're filing out the channel for the inlay. Now, on these two of these rings, the Tenby and the Poppet Sands, I'm leaving them quite wide, and I'm also using quite a wide file. However, on the West Dale, I had a bit of a blowout. So I've decided to change this now to show you guys the more, the most basic design as such. And I've narrowed her down. Overall, she's only 9mm wide. And also as such, I'm using a much, you can see the difference there. I'm using a much thinner file because I don't need as much space to play, with visualization. It's just going to be an inlay of nothing but sand. And fortunately with that one there, the West Dale wood has got some lovely spalting and colouring in it. So on that, at least, I'm going to play more on the wood and the grain than I am the sand itself. Likewise now, this would be Poppet Sands I'm working on here. These I've left wide because, one, the wood is beautiful. But also, I don't know, the width on them just makes it feel more, to me, just since I'm doing more with the inlay, I feel I need to have more around it. I don't know, guys. I'm just dabbling in my shed here. Okay, now with Poppet Sands, you just saw me putting a small layer of sand in there. But now when I was walking around collecting this stuff, there's a lot of sunken trees and logs that are sort of poking through the sand in places. And that's what's stuck in my head the most. So I'm using the bark from the very piece of wood that we're using for the ring. And I'm going to inlay that in, or set it within the sand, periodically, sporadically, whatever you want to call it, randomly. And then that is going to, you know, imitate that visual look. I do attempt, because if you ever see this on Poppet Sand, sorry, I didn't think to take pictures the day I was up there, but around these trees, it's all sunk out, a little area. And I tried to imitate that here, but instead of that coming out around the pieces of bark slash wood, it ended up in between. But I've left it in though, because it's reminiscent of what I'm trying to do. And after a bunch of fidgeting, that was what we were ended up with. Now, Westdale, here we go. As you can see, this is just a thin layer of sand. That way, this would be like the most basic of rings I would sell, sort of the souvenir ring. It's driftwood from the beach, and then the very sand you walk on the beach. No special visualization other than the grain of the wood that I have available at the time and the sand itself. Okay, now Tenby North at least. There's actually a lot goes on around Tenby, but as I said, these two rings are directly meant to represent what I see looking at my feet as I'm walking barefoot across the sand, enjoying the lovely sunny summer weather. And truth be told, there's not a whole lot going on Tenby, at least, mid to low tide area. But what I did find was, when you start finding a seashell, there's a clump of them all over the place, right around there. Then you'll go for a long, a pretty good distance without. So my idea is, as you can see here, I've put another layer of sand in like I did with poppy sands, but this time I've left it a bit higher in places. And I'm using that to put in some of this lovely crushed up mussel shell. That, again, like the sand and like the wood, was collected from Tenby North Beach. And I'm going to do this randomly now around the ring, kind of like I did with the wood before, to imitate the stumbling across the shells as I'm walking along, the empty spots in between, and then the more shells. It's quite it's a very basic interpretation, but we're talking, about 2.5 mil width worth of inlay here on a piece of wood. There's not a whole lot I can do, but I think it turns out actually really nice. And Tenby sand is very yellow, goldish yellow tone to it, as you'll see, and the bluey purple of the mussel shell stands out lovely against it. I think it turns out brilliant. In fact, it's probably my favorite at the moment of the between it and poppet sands. So after all that, that's what I'm ended up with. And from there, we move on to the filing. Okay, so for both the Tenby and Westdale, it's just gentle filing around, diamond file. Then I go to great pains here to show you the Tenby ring. You can already start to see that contrast there between the mussel shell and the sand. Now, when it comes to poppet sands, I did think about just snipping the high, the proud pieces of wood off, but I was worried they might shatter. They're set in there with super glue and all, and it's pretty crisp sometimes. So I was worried if I snipped them, they'd just break out. But once we get there, same process, look. You can see the wood starting to show through. And then also, as I was talking about the divots, the cavities, the sunken areas are left in. And once we get to that point, we tidy up with 120 through 400 wet sanding. And what I do is I'll go one way with one grit, and then the next grit I flip it over and work back. I just find alternating around, going against it helps to work the scratches and all out quicker and easier. It just looks better in my opinion. And also I use this time to refine the bevels on the sides and for the comfort fit. And then from there we move on. I do it for all 3 rings, of course. Then we oil them up one more time. And then we get ready to start applying the finish. Okay. As for the finish, it's as simple as that, guys. It's a very thin layer, which in summer weather dries very quickly. No need for activator right now. Then, just like with sanding, I alternate it back. Again, I think this just works. The glue fills its own cavities in each time you go backwards, I guess. It just helps do it a bit better. I'll put 4 layers on, alternating each, and then I'll go and do 2 layers on the inside, as you can see here. And I just keep going like that, guys. In between every 4 layers on the outside, I'll do a very light sanding with a 400 grit. And I'll go up to 20 to 24 layers, depending on how it looks to me. And I'll do 8 to 10 layers on the inside, depending how it looks. And then we just move on, as you can see, to the final polishing up. And I will go from 400 all the way up to 3000. And each time now, before I change grits in the early stages, I'll dry it off and take a very close look. Make sure I'm getting rid of the scratches from the grit before I move on. But then once I get up around 800 grit to 1000, I can just time it then and just whip on through to 3K. Then, once we're finished with the outside, I take the inside up to about 1500 and blend in the edges. Then I give it all a final buffing with some polishing compound to bring out that crisp, shiny pow in the finish. And then we move on to the final products. I'm actually really happy with how they turned out, guys. I mean, just the overall look here, you can see for yourself. They just look stunning. But then also, overall, I think for a sellable item, like here's West Dale, that would be the sort of most basic one. And there's Temby, look, you can see that golden sand and the muscle. And Poppet sands. So remember, guys, if you think you might want to buy one of these rings or other beach designs, check us out on Etsy or our Facebook group, Facebook page rather. Otherwise, we're also on Instagram. And beyond that, if you enjoyed this video and you want to hear some more rambling through, feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. See you later, folks. Bye-bye.